a very frosty day here in Cheshire today, and I'm thinking about symbols again, I guess. And I'm talking about visual symbols, like graphical symbols, and their status. I haven't got to a point where I can articulate it yet, but for me they're kind of, what are they? They're kind of gists, if you like. I'm thinking of them as kind of cognitive gists, something akin to image schemas, but perhaps I'll come back to that. But the particular symbol that I'm kicking around now is one I've mentioned before, probably, certainly one I've thought about before, which is this symbol of a circle with a dot in the centre, which I know has historical significance. I know it features within kind of hermetic texts, and I think it's also a symbol for some chemical element. I think it represents the sun in some sort of cultural representation. It doesn't really mean any of those things for me, although I may come on to that at some point. It has a couple of significances for me right now, and they're grounded in two, I think, possibly three, but certainly two kind of phenomenological experiences which kind of realise that circle with a point in the centre as key embodied features. The first is the experience that I'm having right now, which is that under normal circumstances, I guess, we seem to find ourselves as embodied beings, as figures in a landscape. We feel ourselves to be relatively solid objects at the centre of our experience, primarily our visual experience. So as I look around, the world kind of arrays itself around me in a panorama, a circular panorama. So the world forms a kind of disc, with myself at the actual point of that disc. But not just visually, also aurally as well. I can, come on Peter, come on guy. I can also hear things coming at me from all directions, and again find myself placed centrally within that disc of sound, with all of the things that come to that, with in relation to things like proximity and distance, and so on. So that's the first thing. I mean, one aspect of that, which is perhaps just worth mentioning, is that that when I'm thinking about the horizon, or when I'm thinking about my placement in the landscape, I'm not simultaneously thinking about the complexities of any kind of interior spaces I might have, or any complexities of any kind of multiplicity that might exist within my sense of self or sense of being. I find myself kind of reduced to a singularity when I'm thinking of that kind of geographical understanding of being. So I feel myself to be a kind of point phenomenon, as I say, centrally located as the hub of the wheel of my own experience. So in graphical terms, and kind of viewed from the top, if you like, a map of that being in a landscape is a circle with representing the horizon, with a dot in the centre representing the central viewpoint. The second kind of phenomenal experience I have, which finds itself mapped out graphically in that same way, and perhaps not as obvious, it's one I've mentioned before, and it's to do with my embodied sense of being. When I think about what it is to be a human being, what it is to be a living mammal, if you like, there are two aspects of that which are most important, or I should say, simplified down to its most salient points. There are two features which seem most salient, and that is a centre and a periphery. And here I'm just talking purely from a kind of survival point of view, or a homeostatic maintenance point of view, that kind of understanding of what the body is, in which the key things that happen to me as a living being happen either at the periphery of my being, at the level of my skin, and the extent of my arms, and contrasting with that, the other thing that's the most important that happens to me happens to my core, happens to my centre, happens to my kind of innermost elements. And I don't really need to know anything about the constituents of that boundary or the constituents of that core to be able to formulate some kind of maintenance program or survival program. If I just think, if I need to pay attention to what's happening at the surface of my skin, because that's where pleasures and pains arise, that's where sources of danger, sources of nutrients, those kind of things impact. So if I think about the surface of my skin, then that's a really good heuristic. And conversely, if I think about the core protecting my most central organs, if you like, again, that would be a good heuristic, and that one would find its form in instinct, like curling up into a ball when you're under threat, or losing using fingers and toes and limbs to frostbite, just so that the core of the body can survive. Those kinds of mechanisms. So again, at the level of my human embodiment, the simplest map of that maintenance program could again, I think, be represented as a circle with a dot in the centre, with the circle representing the periphery and the skin, and the dot in the centre representing the core, or the heart, or however you want to imagine that central point. So again, that symbol is again has a kind of phenomenal, for me at least, has a kind of phenomenological logic to it. The third, and this is not phenomenological, this last thing, the third kind of significance, BB guy, come on! The third kind of significance of that symbol, and there are others actually, is one that I'm kind of struggling for right now. It hasn't really got a felt relationship to sense, but I'm kind of thinking about it occasionally. It's in relation to this Ouroboros symbol, which I've talked about or mentioned, at least in passing before, which is this old symbol of a snake eating its tail, which I know again has lots of significance in different traditions, and has found a most recent incarnation in a book called View from the Centre of the Universe by Joel Freeman and Nancy Adams, in which they configure kind of the laws of the universe in terms of an Ouroboros operating at different scales. So the kind of laws which operate at the scale of the human are very different to the laws which operate at the scale of the bacteria or the atom or the subatomic particle, and similarly working up the scale to the size of the planet or the scale of the solar system, the scale of the universe, and so on. And what they suggest in that particular text is that should there ever be such a thing as a theory of everything, and they kind of point to superstrings, but it could be something else, then that set of laws will effectively join the dots between the very small and the very large, and provide a kind of explanatory mechanism through physical laws by which the very large and the very small are understood as intimately connected, which is the symbol of the Ouroboros, the serpent eating its own tail, where the very large head, if you like, consumes the very small point at the end of the tail. The relationship between that and the circle and the dot symbol that I'm talking about is that I'm kind of imagining, and I'm forcing this a bit, I recognise that, is that I'm imagining that point of contact between head and tail, between very large and very small, I'm imagining that in cross-section, and a cross-section through that particular physical moment, again, would have some kind of resemblance to a circle representing immensity, and a dot representing the infinitesimal, and those two things held in a kind of dynamic singularity, whatever that may be. So that's where I am with that right now.